أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغه مدحته القائلون وليحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون الذي لا يدركه بعد الهمم ولا يناله غوص الفتن الذي ليس لصفته حد محدود ولا نعت موجود ولا وقت معدود ولا أجل ممدود فطر الخلائق بقدرته ونشر الرياح برحمته ووطد بالصخور ميادان أرضه أفضل الدين معرفته ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خير المبشرين والمنذرين شفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وحبيب قلوبنا سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين صلوات الله عليهم أجمعين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين أما بعد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Dearest Mu'mineen, Mu'minat, it is my pleasure, my honor once again to have this opportunity, although I'm not worthy, and so many people here in front of me, my betters in every way. I am humbled and honored to just have this opportunity to discuss the sermon that we have been discussing with you. Of course, our goal is to increase our understanding of Tawheed and of the universe around us, because this enables us to enact our lives according to the way they were meant to be enacted and how the designer and the creator intended it. When you use a machine the way it was intended, that is when it fulfills its full function. And when the creator is Allah and the creation is us, then we have to understand our function. And without knowing our function, we will not achieve the height and the levels that Allah has designated for us. And when we look at prayer and we understand the lutf and the karam that is in prayer, and when we look at the ma'sumin, our aimma, the anbiya, the awliya, the awsiya, when we look at our ulama and we see the way they are engaged in worshiping Allah and how it inspires them and what joy they attain from it, then we come to realize that there is certainly something here which is to be should we say, attained through pleasure. However, what is the pleasure in worship is only begotten once we have ma'rifah. And so understanding Tawheed becomes so essential for us. I'll just share the bare skeleton of my PowerPoint that I have. Time and preparation are always lacking. And we're moving into the second part. Now, we did spend the last 12 Sundays talking about perhaps the first little paragraph of Nahj al-Balagha, the first 12, 13 lines, and realizing that it's a never-ending topic. I was guilty of rushing through it, and thanks to some invaluable feedback from the dear Mu'mineen who grace us with their presence, we realized that perhaps some things need to be explained and some things need to be slowed down, and also to allow absorption of the information. I was thinking about that, and one of the things I realized was, because I was telling myself, Shaeba, why are you going so fast, or what is the reason for this pace? And one of the conclusions I came to was that perhaps because I'm not seeing my audience and their faces. So I see, perhaps one or two faces. I see dear Qamar Abdi Sahab, who's with me with every word and is ahead of me many times. And when I say one sentence, he knows what my last sentence will be. And so, and Mustafa Saab, who's been with me in the same city, and, we discuss a lot. So perhaps I'm seeing those faces and I'm assuming that the other faces are in accordance with that. But of course, everything needs to be processed and it takes time. And when someone speaks, whatever they're saying is just what's in their mind, but how we assimilate it and how we take it forward, that can vary a bit. So I hope you'll excuse me, but nonetheless, you have stuck with me, so I'm so grateful. And, we are at that second part now. So we see that Amirul Mu'mineen Mawlai Kainat Ali ibn Abi Talib as-salatu was-salamu alayhi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. is now talking about creation. And creation itself is a fascinating topic because it's about us. So we are creation, and we want to understand that because science has been trying to understand it for so long, and science has come to the conclusion that they have seen some pictures because science seeks evidence and sensory evidence, and it's based on what we can see and hear and test and prove, which is a good thing. So it has its uses. But what happens is you take snapshots. So we have snapshots of creation, and based on those snapshots, we connect the dots. But the connection of our dots is based on our own imagination. So it's important to realize ourselves first before we try to connect these dots. And that's why we spent many Sundays trying to understand ourselves. Man arafa nafsahu faqad arafa rabbahu. What is our imagination that science, because science will rely on that at the end when there is evidence, but then what happens is there is a scientist whose perspective is important, and they are connecting dots based on their belief that there is no creator. But someone who believes there is a creator will connect the dots in a different way. I personally think that if scientists were mostly creationists and we had that perspective, I think we would reach conclusions faster, simply because when the human mind is understanding there is a reason for it, then it seeks the reason. Whereas if the human mind is thinking it is random, then it is not going to seek a reason. And then our reason and intellect is not used to its full function. So when we say, ansha al-khalqa insha'an, and we look at this phrase, the translation I'm using here is just taken from a website. So, QuranAlislam.org, you'll find this over there. And of course, translations are always, hit and miss. Interestingly, my teacher would always tell me that tarjuma, when he spoke, he would say tarjuma is a word that comes from rajam, and the rajam is for throwing stones. And so tarjuma is like throwing a stone. So he would say it's like you close your eyes and throw a stone and hope it hits the target. So when we're translating things, it's going to be hitting the target sometimes, sometimes not. And so it requires elaboration. Arabic is such an ancient language that the older the language, the more variations people have come up with to explain various things in life. So there's a lot of more depth to older languages, and Arabic is a language of incredible depth. And so, of course, when we translate it literally word for word, it might not make perfect sense. But when we say inshallah, we understand what inshallah means. And we say that if Allah is willing. Now, personally, spending my childhood in Saudi Arabia, inshallah was one of the most common words we heard. But the inshallah that we would hear often in the Middle East, those of you that have worked there and have been there know that sometimes when a Middle Easterner is saying inshallah, that means that maybe it's going to happen, maybe it's not going to happen. In fact, it usually meant when a Saudi said it that if Allah comes and does it himself, it will happen. Otherwise, I don't know if I'll be processing this application tomorrow. So, ba'd salah, inshallah. And that inshallah never came. Allah's inshallah is the opposite of that. Sometimes we say inshallah because we don't want to do something. But when Allah says inshallah, and not that he even says it, but insha itself is something that is coming from within us. We also have our insha. That means there's the insha of Allah, but then our insha is our will, our intent. So our A'immah have said that Allah's creation is his intent. It is his will. That means that when he wills, the way he wills is that we see things come into being. That's very different from my will. To understand my will, I have to see that everything I do in my daily life, in the 24 hours, is based on one original point, and that is the beginning. The beginning of anything you will do in your life is based on your will, your intent, your niyat. So we have a niyat. So when we do our niyat, sometimes it is declared, and that means that we do wuzu with a declaration of niyah. We pray salah or keep Some with a declaration of niyyah. Sometimes we don't declare that niyyah. When it is official ceremonial, we'll declare the niyyah. So somebody who is being sworn into office, if it is a high office of the position of a judge or perhaps some leader in the country, we may find that there is an oath they take and they give their promises and their intentions and their will. So that doesn't mean that everything else we're doing is not based on our niyyah, on our intention, on our insha. It is everything we do, from drinking water to getting ready to go somewhere, to having our breakfast, to talking to somebody in the home, to buying something. Any action whatsoever is starting with our niyyah. That means that although we don't declare it, and sometimes we don't even think about it, sometimes we just act on it right away. There's hardly any time gap between our niyat and then what we're doing. But there is actually always a bit of a gap. So everything we do is within time and space, and it is by mechanisms and mediums and step by step. When Allah has insha, it is very different. So that means that if we want to see His will, His will and intent translates into creation. Our will and intent translates into either thought or word or action. This is what our will and intent does. That means when we will and intend something, we may first think about it, and then we may speak about it if the intention was to say something, or we may act upon it if the intention was to perform an action. Allah's will is not enacted by word necessarily or by action, for He is the creator of word and the creator of action. So to understand His will and what happens after that, I have to first look at my own. So if I'm thirsty, I will drink water. That means that first I had to have the idea that I am thirsty. And then I have the intention to drink water. So I reacted to something in my environment. Allah's actions are not like that. Everything He originates is without reaction. He initiated creation most initially. This means that it was the beginning. Before He initiated it, there was no creation. That is something also that requires a bit of thought on our part, because when we look at the known universe, we realize that all of this that is present here had a beginning. And what is before that beginning is that part where we come to try and understand Allah, which means that He began things that were not there. So there was no beginning until He gave them a beginning. So when we say, how long has Allah been here? Well, that requires a beginning of Him. But He initiated the idea of beginning when He created. So insha al-khalqa, and khalaqa is a word that we use for creation. And then we say wabtada'ahu ibtida'an, and He commenced. Ibtida is a word that we use as well in Urdu. Many words in Urdu have been borrowed from Arabic. So therefore, Urdu speakers have a distinct advantage in that there will always be some vocabulary that they've been using in their mother tongue. That's why I always encourage our youth to not let go of the Urdu language. It is a gift, it is a blessing, it is something that is in your home and easy to acquire, whereas people spend money and go to far places to try and learn a language. There's one that is just sitting in front of us. All we have to do is pick it up from the tray and take a bite. So when we speak to people around us in this language, it definitely allows us to think in that language. And then when we see the Arabic word, it automatically translates into a picture in our mind. Although you can translate it into English as well, but there's a distinct advantage and speed of understanding that comes with Urdu. And so commenced it originally. I've taken a little summary here, or you could say that it's just basically what is mentioned in a hadith from our Imam. Our Imam, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, as-salatu was-salamu alayhi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad, excuse me, has said and instructed us regarding salah. in Bab-e Tawheed of Al-Kafi, we see, and also in the book, The Great Imam, which is present in English also, we see that there is a discussion, and he was discussing Salah, and he mentions that when you pray, do not imagine Allah. And then when he explains why we shouldn't imagine Allah, he says that anything you imagine will never be outside of creation, and Allah is outside of creation. Now, this to me was a very fascinating sentence, because when I thought about it, I started thinking about imagination and how the Imam is saying that anything we imagine is always within the realm of creation, which means within the realm of our known universe. That means that there is a lot around us, but we do not come up with anything new. So to understand our limitation of not being able to come up with anything new enables us to understand the wondrous power of Allah, where everything he originates and creates is new and has variation and is different. But you know, in my mind, I tried to challenge the idea. So I started thinking, wait a minute, are we not able to imagine things that are not in our known universe? Is that not possible? For example, I grew up as a child reading a lot of fantasy and science fiction. I was fascinated with the imaginative world, with the world that is different from what I see around me. And as I thought about, you know, fantasy creatures, creatures of imagination that humans had made up in their mind, apparently, and written in books. For example, we see the dragon. And so, you know, dragons and unicorns and flying horses and the different creatures and different types of creations. Now, we see all the creations around us that are living in biology, but writers have written in fantasy and science fiction about ancient creatures that didn't exist. Of course, it was in their mind, but they came up with all these different ideas, and science fiction stories came up with ideas of how aliens would be. And as we looked at all, so I grew up looking at all these different types of life forms that probably, perhaps I thought don't exist. So therefore, I started thinking, what does that mean? Does that mean if the Imam is saying that whatever we imagine is within the realm of creation, then therefore is everything we're imagining already created? That means, are there dragons and are there other alien-like creatures that we haven't seen? Is that what it means? Does that mean anything I put in my mind is already there? And it doesn't exactly mean that, I noticed. But as I started to break down what a writer imagines when they're writing down about a imaginative creature that they've created in their mind, I started to realize that what we do in our faculty of imagination is not create new. So we do not do an ibtida of something new when we are imagining. Rather, what we do is, like a painter, with colors that they have, they put them on a canvas. On the canvas of our mind, we imagine things, but what we use to paint that picture is from the colors that are already provided. That means, in the simplest example, if we just take one and move on, we would see the dragon. The dragon is a great example because it's not a creature that we think exists, and nor have any fossils been found, yet it is something in imagination. However, when I looked at the dragon in its basic sense, I realized that it was nothing but a large lizard. So really, the imagination of the author to create such a creature, now perhaps they did exist, one could argue, perhaps, and yes, it's possible. Our Earth is very old and creatures have come and gone. And so is it possible? I wouldn't deny it 100%. I haven't seen any evidence for it, of course, but the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. So that means if we don't have evidence for something, it's not necessary that it doesn't exist. It simply means that we have not proven its existence yet, nor have we disproven it. However, if we take it not to exist, then you took a large lizard and you took wings and you took fire and you put it together. Neither the large lizard nor the fire nor the wings were new. So then I realized our imaginative capacity is the power to take different creations in the universe and break them apart and rebuild them and put them together. So we don't really come up with anything new. It is said that in Jannah, there will be colors that we have never seen. There will be flavors that we have never tasted. There will be sounds that we have never heard. And I try to imagine that. So I try to imagine a color I have never seen. And I wanted to be the originator of a color. And as I tried to think of a color, I couldn't. But then when I went to the Home Depot store to buy paint for the home, I found that the Home Depot store had 1,000 different colors over there. As I looked at all of them, my head started spinning. I could not at all decide which color to use. I'm so glad that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decided a lot of things for me. If I had to decide my skin color, the shape of my face, my body, I would probably be so indecisive and would take forever to come up with something. But Allah's creation is perfect and in its place, and He knows exactly where to put what. So therefore, when I looked at all those colors, I said, wait a minute, I thought there were 7 colors. Look, humans have invented all these colors over here, so we have created new colors. But in reality, what we did was we took the colors that Allah gave us and mixed them up in different combinations. So we didn't create a new color, rather we just simply took what was there and came up with variations of it. So we can mix and match, we can break apart and rebuild, but to bring something completely new, a completely new flavor. I noticed that in potato chips, when you go to the store, there's so many flavors now, but you never see a completely new flavor. All we're doing is we're taking flavors of other foods. So I saw a potato chip that was like, I don't know, something like beef flavored, for example. So that's not really a new invention, is it? We simply took one flavor from one object and put it into another. So when we realize the limit of our imagination, although it's quite unlimited in a sense that we do a lot with our imagination. I'm not belittling the human imagination. It is a faculty that Allah has bestowed upon us to allow us to understand Him. It allows us to reach great understanding and achievements in technology. It is our imagination that took us and said, wait, if a bird has wings, why don't I take an object and make it and shape it with wings so that we can fly? So this idea is based on our imagination, but we would never have come up with an airplane if we had not seen the bird. All of our creations in technology also are taken from nature. So we see that, in hospitals, they came up with a bandage that would be most antimicrobial, and it was based on the design of shark fins. So marine biologists looked at shark skin and saw how bacteria were kept away. And they realized that the sterilization, the anti-infective process of the shark was thanks to the simple jagged edges of the fins as they come together of their skin in various parts. So what they did was they created a bandage like that. They created Velcro because they looked at the burr of bushes and trees, that those sticky little products that trees let out, those white fluffy burrs, B-U-R-R, that is how they invented Velcro. So when we look at creation and pick it apart and put it together, that's what Allah has given us. That is what He has bestowed upon us. That is our imagination. And that faculty differentiates us from all other animals. That means that although today's approach and attitude in the modern world is to try and turn us back to that animal sense, where we are making decisions based on now what other animals do. So we say that, for example, we don't need to drink milk because other animals don't drink milk in adulthood, for example, or we don't need meat because, there's other animals that don't eat meat, etc. When we compare ourselves to animals biologically, there's many similarities, but this one faculty of imagination and intellect and reason and ability to take things apart and put them together is huge. It is such a big difference. This difference will differentiate us in a way that we cannot now compare ourselves to those animals. So therefore, when we are praying and anything we imagine is now coming within our realm of creation. So whether it's colors or flavors, there are limited, this universe is based on a certain amount of light waves in a certain frequency. There are frequencies that we have not captured here yet in the universe. That's why, and flavors, flavors are based upon stimulating your tongue at various points, various taste buds, various combinations of those taste buds will give you a certain flavor. Same thing with fragrances. So really, it's a limit. And when we expand that, then who knows what the expansion is, and who knows what a color would be like that is not here in our universe right now. So there's a certain excitement that comes with that, a curiosity to see what will be in the next realm. If this is just a prologue, if this is a limited look at everything, then what is the unlimited look? If this is just for a little while, a glimpse, just an advertisement, just basically a sneak preview of what is to come. So that's what entices us and excites us about being motivated to achieve something in the next world, because this is just the prologue. And so when we are trying to understand, creation, and we're looking at the word khalaqa, then this verse of the Holy Quran becomes very useful to us as we take a look at this. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So the basic translation you see here is by one of the English translators, and we see it's Shakir. So, Inna Rabbakum Allahu, indeed, or surely your Lord is Allah. Alladhi, He is the one who khalaqa, created. So we're using the word khalaqa for creation here. As-samawati wal arda, the heavens or the skies, and the earth itself. Fi sittati ayamin, in 6 days. So, of course, as the earth and skies are being created, we understand that when we look at our concept of the word day, we know that for us it is 24 hours. On other planets in our solar system, a day is a very different length and period. And some planets, the day is very short, and on some planets, the day is even longer than the year itself. That means some planets spin around the sun faster than they rotate on their own axis. So it's hard for me to imagine a life where a day is longer than my year, for example. So that's why when I think about imagining life in heaven, where life perhaps it doesn't have that time limitation that it has now, it becomes very difficult. But I'm very curious to know what it feels like. But when I try to imagine it, I'm unable to. That's why a lot of the things we know about heaven are very, very minimal and just a sneak preview, and really things that we might be able to understand. And so, I see the youth saying things like, well, so what about the Quran or the holy books mention there will be gardens in heaven, there'll be rivers flowing, there will be mountains and streams and fruits. And some people who are living in an affluent life, or people who are living in any city neighborhood where everything is available to you, that doesn't seem like a big deal. People who go to a river every weekend and see the mountains and eat what they want to anyway, they might be thinking, well, okay, so what? I mean, it's a river of milk and honey. That's fine. The youth will sometimes say, I don't want a river of milk and honey. I want Wi-Fi. Will there be Wi-Fi in Jannah? So, when we're looking at and trying to imagine that, I tell them that you're comparing it to your current existence, and it's so different from your current existence that you can't apply it like that. And so that's why the pleasures, the joys, the experiences, it's very, very difficult for us to try and even imagine it. So we just get basically a little vision of it, but we really don't know what it's going to be like. So that's why when we say that the earth and sky wasn't there, then there were no days. But when we're saying sittati ayamin, and we're saying 6 days, and this 6 days we understand could be many different things. And it could be 6 stages, for example, or 6 steps, right? So that means that there were stages, or there were days, or there were steps. So that's one type of creation, where we're seeing it happen step by step. In the same way that humans are born, we are born step by step. We create things also, but we create them step by step. That means that it has to go through a process and a cause and effect of a cascade of reactions. And then ثُمَّ اسْتَوَىٰ عَلَى الْأَرْشِ, and so he raised his throne, يُغْشِي اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارَ, and he throws the veil of night over the day. So the night is chasing the day, and the day is chasing the night. يَطْلُبُهُ حَثِيثًا وَالشَّمْسُ وَالْقَمَرَ وَالنَّجُومُ مُسَخَّرَاتٍ بِأَمْرِهِ. Now this is where we come to the word بِأَمْرِهِ. And here it says that he created the sun, the moon, and the stars, made subservient by his command, بِأَمْرِهِ. So again, the word amr is mentioned as the verse continues. Allah is not, lahul khalqu, for him khalq, wal amru, and the amr. Now here amr is translated as command. Amr is a command, amr is authority, amr is instruction, amr is what enacts the will of Allah. So that means that Allah is using two mechanisms, we could say, to bring everything into being. And one of them is khalq and one of them is amr. It's important to understand these two so we can understand the different types of beings that are in the universe. Tabarakallahu Rabbul Alameen, and indeed he is the one, surely he is the creator. Surely his is the creation, the command. Blessed is Allah, the Lord of the worlds. So his is the creation and the command. Now, when we look at khalq, it's important to realize that when we come into being, then what's happening is we are coming through stages. We are born as a blank slate. One of the differences, again, between animals and humans is that animals are born with many reflexes, instincts, and connections in their brain that are present at the time they're born. Compared to humans, humans' brains are very unmapped when they are born. The number of synapses is how scientists calculate how much knowledge is present in the brain before birth. As synapses and connections that form in our brain are connections that are formed whenever we learn something new. So when you learn something new, for you, it is knowledge. For the electrical activity of your brain, it is a connection. So when animals are born, we see that they are the most connected. And that means that much of their instinct for survival is already present. Whereas we see for humans, they require far more constant care from their parents. And that's because they will learn a lot more after birth compared to animals. So therefore, we are going through stages. We are born without knowledge, and then we attain knowledge. Interestingly, Allah has introduced some of the prophets that he sent as being born with knowledge. We see Hazrat Isa alayhi salam. We see him in the Quran being quoted as speaking from the cradle. This classical example shows us that prophets are sent with knowledge. They will not be sent to attain knowledge over here. And that makes perfect sense, because how would a teacher learn while they're teaching? Meaning that, sure, a teacher learns while they're teaching in the sense that they learn more, but not in the sense that they're completely blank when they go into a classroom, as blank as the students, and now they're all learning together. Of course, the teacher had to come from somewhere having learned that course already. In the same sense, of course, it makes logical connection that a prophet would be sent in the same way. So that big difference for us is very important, because that tells us that that station and that status is only achieved by those who are sent with knowledge, not by those who try to attain knowledge here. So we as human beings, not sent as prophets, but rather going through stages of evolution of our knowledge and evolution or stages of development of our body, we do not expect that we know everything. And that's very important. Not to say that a prophet knows everything. It is Allah that knows everything. But what the prophet knows is what Allah considers sufficient for that prophet to implement what the message in their time and in their era, in their land. So when we're saying that, then we realize that we always have to learn. And that's very humbling. And that makes it a little easier for us to understand that we will make mistakes, and we are human beings, and there's always room to learn. And these prophets who came with knowledge, even for them, when we look at the famous incident of Hazrat Musa and Hazrat Khizr alayhi salam in the Quran, we see that Hazrat Musa, who's the prophet, is now going to get instruction, perhaps, from Hazrat Khizr. So the idea of being taught by another. And that, of course, shows us that Hazrat Musa, though, was still willing to learn, which shows the humbleness and humility and great qualities of a prophet. So that in itself is amazing. So sometimes, we forget how incredible Hazrat Musa is in his humility as well, in that he goes and he's willing to learn. Perhaps because his realm of understanding was in the realm of Sharia and in the realm of the laws that he had to implement. And Hazrat Khizr was enacting at a different level. He was unable to be patient, as the Quran says, and he asked the question when it was not meant to be asked, perhaps. So that was really it, but he was still willing to learn and he still went along. So that shows you an incredible humility. What is Amr and what is Khalq? So it's important to realize that when we say Khalq, what we are saying is that it is a creation that is coming into being through mechanisms and step by step. On the other hand, Amr is a little different, and Amr is further explained. We see, now this was Surah Al-A'raf, Surah number 7, verse number 54. We see in Surah Yasin, verse number 82, the last surah. And here Amr is explained a little bit. Innama, and this is used to mean indeed only. Amruhu. Amruhu is translated here, his command. So Amru is the command itself here. It's in the noun form. And who means a reference to Allah here, who is the possessor of the Amr. So idha is when, arada, when he, and this arada is then the intention. This is the irada. This again ties into our own irada. And that means that Allah's intention is what comes into being. Our intention may happen or may not happen. Our intention is limited by many constraints. So what Allah has done has differentiated us. When we look at us, we can understand that He is different from us. And even with that understanding, we start to understand Him who is incomprehensible in His might and glory. Even then we can gain some level of understanding by looking at ourselves. So He limited our intention so that we would see that He has no limits in His intention. Our intention is enacted through steps and mechanisms, so we would realize that His intention has no steps and mechanisms. What He intends will happen. That means even when He creates by creation, the way He is creating is that He wills it, and these steps start to occur. So if He wills something to go through in stages, that doesn't mean that He is thinking about each step as it comes up and deciding what to do next. Rather, He wills it to be in stages from the beginning. So that is going to come up a little later as we continue the translation. إِذَا أَرَادَ شَيْئًا أَن يَقُولَ. And so that He says lahu, He says to it. So that's interesting, is only to say to it. Now, when we say things to that which is present. So that means if I'm speaking to you, you are present. I cannot say or speak to something that is not there. That's why I can't originate anything new. So Allah is speaking to something because He's saying, what is He saying to it? He is saying kun, and kun means to be. So what He is saying is be. But when He is saying be, that thing which is to be is not there at that time. So that means what He is speaking to is actually not in existence. So we who are in existence speak to things that are in existence. In fact, for us, if we're speaking to things that are not there, we start to wonder about this person's sanity. For us, it's a very different mechanism or a very different idea when we're speaking to things that are not there. But when Allah speaks to things that are not there, then they come to be. Fayakun. So kun, be, fayakun, then it is. And this fa is a word that is basically meaning immediately. That means right away, that it's like an effect. So it's a cause and effect. So what we see is that a cause has an effect. And if the cause is powerful, we see the effect immediately. So when we have a spark, the cause of the spark causes a fire. The effect of fire from the spark is happening immediately. And the bigger the spark, the bigger the flame. And so the cause determines many qualities of the effect. And if the cause is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then the effect itself must also be magnificent and immediate. So what we see is kun fayakun, immediately it happens. That means that I am so limited, I cannot speak to anything or imagine anything that does not exist. But everything that does not exist does exist in the intellect of Allah. Or rather, I don't know if I can use the word intellect, because Allah created intellect. So what I mean is the ilm of Allah. That means it is within the ilm, in the knowledge. So everything that is ever to be, that has come already,
Dr. Sir, we cannot hear you anymore.
Can't hear you, sir.
Hello?
Yeah, cannot hear you.
Yeah. He's currently muted. Okay, now he should be okay.
Thank you.
Can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Not Maulana yet.
It is possible he might be having some audio issues, so let's probably give him a minute or two to get back. In the meanwhile, let's thank you all for joining, and let's recite a Surah Fatiha for Sayyid Dawood Haidar Rizvi ibn Safdar Ali Rizvi. Thank you.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد محمد وعلى محمد को पहुंचे उससे जो सवाब पहुंचे मरहूम दाऊद दीवार रहमत में जगह
Jazakallah. Dr.
You, Assalamu alaikum, मेरी आवाज आ रही है क्या?
Yeah, we can hear you just fine.
Acha. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل فرجهم.
मैंने वैसे कुछ क्लिक तो नहीं किया था, लेकिन कुछ खुद ब खुद ही हो गया. तो अब जाहिर है कि बाज़ दफ़ा इंटरनेट का ज़र्फ नहीं होता. बात तौहीद की हो रही है तो हम इंसानों की समझ में नहीं आती, तो फिर हमारी क्रिएशन है ये इंटरनेट, तो बाज़ दफ़ा ज़र्फ नहीं पकड़ पाता. So as we were saying that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when his irada comes in, then it is coming in as whatever is in his ilm now will come into being. And if his ilm is infinite, then that means that everything that is coming into being is coming from that infinite knowledge, and that means that it will never end. So the amount of creations and the amount of colors, the amount of sounds and fragrances and different types of universes and different multiverses and different planets and colors and the shapes, everything, what we are seeing is such a limited scope of that, with a few frequencies of light, a few elements. We see this universe. How many elements are in this universe? Our periodic table is not over 200. And as we look at the elements, and this is what, like 100 elements? And Allah has created what we see around us. Imagine like the other infinite elements. We see circles and ovals and rotations and elliptical rotations of planets. What about all the other shapes and sizes we haven't seen yet? We see the colors of the rainbow that can be diversified into thousands of colors, and the sounds that can be diversified into thousands of different sounds and intonations. and the different forms of life and the different ways to gain nutrition. Anything you look at in nature, there is so much variety that in our lifespan, even our collective humanity lifespan, all of our brains together on this planet, from the beginning of our intellect till now, as we gather knowledge, we have not discovered it all. We have not been able to, and as we continue to do that, we are realizing we never will, and we are seeing the universe expand, and it's hard for us to catch up with it. And this is based on what? Just a few frequencies of video, a few frequencies of audio, a few different colors, a few different shapes and sizes, some elements. So it is incredible what is to come. Because what we're seeing is, it can't even be given a percentage. We can't even say, oh, what you're seeing here is 0.01%. The best is yet to come. What you're seeing here is just a little sneak preview. What is to come is incredible. You see, how can we not be fascinated by him, by Allah and his creation and what he has brought into existence? But we have to look at it. We have to try to understand it, because sometimes I notice that people think that as they gain knowledge and become more scientific, they start to think that there is no God, there is no existence like that. It should actually be the opposite. As we start to look at everything around us and realize it is coming from just a few things, from one explosion, we see all of this happening. That's amazing. And the little bit of detail that has gone into this universe, we as human beings are made of elements, and so is our planet and everything around us. And elements are created by the explosion of stars. So is that not incredible that exploding stars eventually become planets and the life on those planets? And Allah has brought all of that into origin by these mechanisms. So the fact that he uses these mechanisms is not like us. When we use mechanisms, we have a limitation because we have to use mechanisms. When he uses mechanisms, it is to show, we can see from that his power, his might, his glory. We can see that he is Latif, and Latif means that which is unseen and unheard, and that which can barely be perceived. It is there, but just away from our senses. So it is very, very almost imperceptible, because he has hidden himself behind so many steps of creation and not brought himself to the forefront, rather put himself at the origin and beginning of things. So everything is manifested, and he is hidden behind his creation in that sense, very close to it, yet very far away from it. So to say kun fayakun is incredible. And when we look at this, we realize that this amr, something's come into being this way. So if the earth did not come into being this way, be, and so it is, because it came in through the idea of Khalq. Because when we look at this verse over here, we see that Allah lahul khalqu wal amru is not for him khalq and amr. And therefore, over here in this verse of Surah Yasin, that was Surah Al-Araf, we see that Amr has not come. We see that Amr has come in over here, but not the word Khalq. So that tells us that, one way he brings things into being is through an immediate effect. So he is able to avoid some of the causes if he so wishes. In the simplest example, we see that we as human beings have causes. Our causes are our parents. Allah wants us also to respect our parents and to obey them as an authority, because they are the cause and we are the effect. So it is very important for the effect to understand the cause and why Allah chose that cause to be the means for them to come into being. So we respect that cause. In the same way, Allah caused us to know him, but not directly, but rather through a medium. So there was another cause. So Allah causes other causes. So the cause was the ma'sumin, the anbiya, the Aimma. So what we see is they caused us to understand him. Therefore, we have to respect that. And that is in our religion. That is in our culture. The wasila, the medium, is always given great respect. That humbles us. It allows us to see our place in the universe and to understand our relation with Allah and with the cause. Because if Allah wanted us to be kun fayakun, then he could have chosen to do that. But he gave us these mechanisms, and in those mechanisms is our humility. So whenever anything is causing us to be affected in a certain way, and the effect is good, then we should respect that. We should be thankful, we should be grateful, and in the simplest sense, we thank somebody who gives us a gift. But sometimes we are not as thankful to our parents who gave us the gift of life, who gave us the gift of body and form. Although it was Allah who gave it, he chose not to give it by kun fayakun. Rather, he chose to give it by step mechanisms. So the wasila is essential. That means we reach him through these same mechanisms. So we are reaching Allah because of our parents, because of our imam. Therefore, we have to have that respect for them and that love for them, for he chose them to be that medium. So we have to understand that the choosing was by him himself. And also, when we see that we are using these mediums and Allah did not create everything like that, therefore he sometimes skipped a medium. For example, we see in the case of Hazrat Isa alayhi salam, we see that he does not use the typical medium of the father. So he shows us that if he so wills, he can create without using these mediums. But by using the medium, there is his wisdom in it, and there are reasons for it. So to create Hazrat Isa in that way is showing us that he does not have to. And then the example that the holiest messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his debate with the Nasrani, with the Christians regarding Hazrat Isa, as per the ayat and as per the command of Allah, he says to them that the example is like Hazrat Adam, who was created without mother and father. Now no mechanism is used. So Allah is showing us he has ways. So there will be people walking amongst the earth who are created through the mechanism of mother and father, and there will be one who is walking around without the mechanism of father, and before that there were two who are walking around without the mechanism of mother and father. So we see Hazrat Adam alayhi salam and Bibi Hawa alayhi salam. So we see this happening, and this tells us that there are other ways. So then, you know, we ask the question, what about those who were present before? So what was the medium that he used for causing everything? This means that Allah now is the original point from which all causations are emanating. So everything now is an effect of that. And somewhere in those effects is me and you. So when we look at ourselves in this branching tree of effects, and the root is Allah itself, we see a magnificent universe that is nothing, that is in its basic essence, many causes and effects. So the question we ask is, then what is the first cause? Because something needs to be caused. So therefore, when he says, you know, innama amruhu idha arada shay'an, then we have to know the first cause. Time is limited now, so I will end with a sentence. And you know, what we would say is that the first cause itself is the first thing that came into creation. And when we ask that question, no human being is able to tell us the first thing that came into creation except for one. And that would have to be the first existence. Only the first existence can tell us, because that one knows. Everything else comes after. What comes after is not able to look back and see. That is why Allah also, in us, in that sense, in our memory, I don't remember going through the stages of creation. I don't remember the first trimester in my mother's womb. I don't remember when I was one cell. I was one cell at one time. I was hayat. I had been given a ruh, I was alive, but I don't remember that. I don't remember anything even in the first few years. So if, you know, I see that, how am I to know what was before me when I do not even know what is within me? But the first existence can tell you. And there is only one who said, Awwalu ma khalaqallahu. And this hadith is in all of our sects of Islam. We accept this. Awwalu ma khalaqallahu. The first thing that Allah created. And it was only one who said it, the holiest Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Awwalu ma khalaqallahu nuri. So we understand by this our place in the universe, and the Ma'sumin, their nur was the first that was created. Therefore, we see now every other effect will be because of this. So this is the original. Now, how much respect we have for our parents as they are our medium, now you have to multiply that as you go each level. That means that your parents were caused by their parents, were caused by their parents. So as you go up in each generation, you magnify it. And then you come to Hazrat Adam, who is the original cause. How much respect should we have for him? And then you come to the cause of the universe itself. And that's what we say in Hadith Qissa, that inni ma khalaqtu sama'an mabniyatan, and the sentence goes on, wala ardham madhiyya. So we see nothing was created but for them. So therefore, that is why they were the best able to come and explain to us these words. When we look at the words of Amir al-Mu'mineen, we see that Amir al-Mu'mineen came and explained things that never, ever could anybody have imagined. How is it possible to read these words? That is why one said when they read these words that this person who said these words either, and that's the first sermon of Nahjul Balagha, either created the universe or was present when it was created. The Masumin were present when it was created because they were the cause. So when this verse says, Innama amru, amruhu means his amr. His amr is different from him because his amr means his possession. The amr is in his possession. He has control over it. That is why he says in the last verse, verse 83, فَسُبْحَانَ الَّذِي, and then he says, فَسُبْحَانَ الَّذِي, and Subhan is he. And who is Subhan? He is the one who is Subhan, who has all of this. إِنَّمَا أَمْرُهُ إِذَا أَرَادَ شَيْئًا أَن يَقُولَ لَهُ كُن فَيَكُونَ. And so we see over here that Amr is not Allah. Amr is his possession. Therefore, Amruhu is this Amr is the Masumi. That means when he gave a command, his command came into being because everything that he wills exists. So when he gave the command, it immediately came into an existence form. This form was Nur. This form was Masumin. So everything they do is his command, not because they know his command, because they are his command. They are his light. It is something that is very different. If I give someone a command, they hear my command and then they enact it. But Allah's command is an existence that always knows what his will is. So it is a connection that is beyond what we have as connection. And that is why when we look at Amir al-Mu'mineen coming into this world, Kaun Amir al-Mu'mineen, wo Maulay Kainat, jo is Kainat mein